Peter Straub, and I write novels. And I wrote, upon the publication of my last novel, I did what we all have to do now when we publish books, which is I had to we have podcasts and blog interviews, and I wrote an entry for a very good literary blog called The Millions, and I kind of went off a little bit. And the point of this article was my sort of impatience with the notion of genre, especially boundaries. I mean, this is a battle we've all fought many times, and it's both won and lost. Anyhow, I tried to claim as much pop territory as possible for my own little patch of ground. So I said, all you other people are in denial. We, on the other hand, relish and know the value of pain, loss, suffering, etc., etc. And hence this panel, I gather, because they quoted me in the description.
Yeah, I've actually got a printout of your blog entry here, which comes with a haunted Lego figure. Very cool. I started thinking about the fact that, here we are on Burlington Mall Road, which is pretty awful. Its designers are presumably human and presumably not sadists, but it was designed for people, and it's a miserable stretch of land where even if all you like to do is shop and suck down frappuccinos, there are so many better places, so many more pleasurable places to do it. This landscape would be described, I think, in a literary fiction novel, and we'll attack that term shortly, I know, as bleak, and I think it would be described exactly the same way in a horror novel. I felt, and this is actually a little contrary to the panel's proposal that you were proposing a new genre. I'm going to try to drop that phrase as often as possible. that in fact the two are essentially doing the same things, or capable of doing the same things, and one is just being a little bit more blunt about it. Literary fiction has a long history of describing miserable feelings, alcoholism. Yeah, you were talking in your thing. You had a list of things in your blog entry. Alcoholism, adultery, depression, suicide. These are serious literary topics, and these are also the topics of horror fiction. So I see a confluence of the two. The main difference might be fantasy, but there's fantasy in literary fiction as well. So I'm hoping that we can sort of jump from that point. And
now I know who you are. The new genre.
Yes. Good. Now that we've established who we are, yeah, I want to talk about this idea. The idea presented by the panel was that maybe you were suggesting some kind of new thing, but I think actually what you're suggesting is something very old, which is that it's all fiction and it's dealing with the things that preoccupy people most of the time, which unfortunately is not necessarily happiness. Does that sound right?
Happiness is boring. He was assuming the literary primacy of the territory he has chosen to occupy. That I thought was a worthy sentiment.
I'd like to introduce one word to the vocabulary. This is what I describe myself. I'm not transgender, I'm transgenre. And I wonder if there's in this area that Peter is talking about, there's something that actually transcends genre.
We hope. I have a problem with the term transcends genre because it's a lazy usage adopted by reviewers who like a book of a certain kind more than they think they should. And to face that at all, the discomfort of this affection, they say, oh, well, yes, of course, it transcends this genre. I'm sorry, that's exactly like saying that some African-American gentleman who's achieved a great deal is a credit to his race.
However,
it's the same fucking thing.
Are you okay with the word transgenre?
Transgenre is great.
Okay, that's where I was going.
I'm all for it.
The way that I had interpreted the panel topic, you're welcome to stop me if I'm totally off base. The Now that we know that, I'll go on. One of the things that's mentioned here is the idea that a horror story can act as a sort of vicarious thrill ride, kind of the literary equivalent of a roller coaster, and yet, and this is also true of literary fiction, like you said, it's also quite possible for a horror story to not just induce, fear of the monster, but really, really unpleasant emotions like are listed here. Shame, grief, and there's an interesting phenomenon in which horror can take just the absolute worst. The absolute worst that a human being can go through, and turn it also into a sort of vicarious entertainment. And it's a little, you come away from a story like that, perhaps not having enjoyed it, but somehow having appreciated it nonetheless. I know that's certainly true for me. And I can actually cite an example, Peter, of something that you have written that had that effect on me. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there's an incident at the end of the novel Mr. X that involves this very sort of terrible, intimate thing done by a family member to a relative, and there's nothing frightening about it exactly, but it's deeply disturbing. Really, really disturbing, and I liked it because of that.
Sure, of course.
Well, disturbing can be a lot better than frightening. Because frightening is like one thing, and disturbing is one or two. You were scared, and then you thought about it, and you felt worse.
Hopefully 3, 4, 5. Really dark.
This brings up, you actually used one of the words I've been thinking about as I was reading your essay, and the description, the term enjoyment came up, and also the term perversity, both of which seem to go hand in hand as far as I'm concerned. But also the question that it raises is whether or not, I think there's a sense that genre is read purely for enjoyment and for pleasure, and that regular fiction is not, which begs the question, why are we reading quote unquote literary fiction? And I think part of the answer is that it's not just read for enjoyment, and it doesn't have to just be fun or a thrill ride to be, or the enjoyment is more complex than simply it tastes good. I was hoping people could riff off of that, the idea of enjoyment and reading.
Well, my favorite piece of that essay was the line about, do you really spend your life hang gliding from one emotional peak to another? A couple of years ago, I read back-to-back a book on achieving flow, which is supposed to be the highest human state in which you achieve all marvelous things. Back-to-back with a book on pathological liars and how they set their victims up. And that flow state seemed to be very close to exactly the state in which pathological liars want to sort of coddle their victims into exactly the bad place. So it's like, you're out there and you're going, and then and so, that flow state is on the one hand where you can achieve marvelous things, and it also does set you up to be vulnerable in a certain way. And that was sort of, life isn't filled with chocolate-covered diamonds. Some other things happen.
I don't want to say another word until I hear what Barry Malzberg has to say.
About what? The only thing approaching a thought I had is that I was writing stories which were creating great offense and getting me in trouble. Years before 2/3 of the people in this room were born. And so what? What is on? Are we having a panel on a genre? Is unpleasant fiction a genre shelved with horror and science fiction and romance and vampires, or are we talking about the broad? Or is unpleasant fiction Rabbit Run and Herzog and Humboldt's Gift and the by and so on. I don't know what the point of this is. Some writing is pleasant. Good writing can be pleasant to read or unpleasant to read, but the aesthetic experience, yes, is supposed to override.